Oops, looks like my board is not loaded yet. Let's fix that. Hello, MK. Welcome. Can you hear me all right? I really slid into home plate here when it comes to timing of the stream, so hopefully it'll be a good one. Anyway, welcome everyone to my next live lesson. This one's about tactics. We had a viewer request for more content similar to the series I did on thought process while solving problems. All right. Whatever echo there is, it's probably from my space, as long as it's not like really bad. Hello, Planet Chess Club on Twitch. Thanks for dropping in. Always good to see you. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about how you know when tactics are going to happen, which I think is a very important topic and a rather difficult one too. Many people, even some very strong and historically relevant people, have said, often with some irony, that they are able to solve tactics, but they're not able to make them happen in their own games. One of the most, thank you for lurking, Planet Chess Club. One of the most high-profile examples of that is Rudolf Spielmann, who agonized that while Alekhine was able to get all these positions that Spielmann could easily win, Spielmann was never able to manage to get those same kinds of positions. Now, he wasn't talking just about tactics, so that's a little bit of a misquote on my part, but the sentiment is largely the same. So let's actually start with an example from Alekhine. I did not load it ahead of time because I was very slow, so just give me a moment to pull it up for you guys. This is an example that I know by heart, but I like to copy the entire game all at once if I can. Yeah, here it is. It's from 1942, right before World War II messed up Alekhine's entire life and the lives of many others. Much worse than his, arguably. Okay, let me import this real quick. This one actually doesn't fit another larger theme of the positions that I decided to do today for different reasons, but we'll get into that. So let's make sure this is playing out properly. Yes. Okay. So let's go to a moment in Alekhine's game where there is a tactical moment, and it might be difficult for people to spot it. So we can discuss what kind of problems people encounter in these situations. But first, let's just, breeze through the early part of this game. This queen e2 line's not very common anymore. So now white's finished development, and black has two. And then Alekhine begins this maneuver of the knight, which is very common in Italian and Spanish opening. So without too much commentary here, he brings the knight to f5. And then after a couple of moves, we reach what I consider to be like the diagram position, where we should be thinking about our topic of the day, which is sensing the tactical moment. This game is nearly over. It ends in a tactical way. But if I didn't tell you, it might be hard to identify that, right? In fact, white is down material. There's nothing utterly spectacular about the white pieces at first glance. In fact, depending on what white wants to do, if they try to be very coarse about it and just start maneuvering their pieces some more, they run into tactical problems themselves. For instance, you cannot really lift the rook from a1 because of rook takes d1 type stuff. So let's think about tactics in general. Like, when do tactics happen? What criteria need to be satisfied in the position for you to even begin thinking about the calculus of variations and looking for a direct win of either checkmate or material in the position, decisive advantages? I think that many players are constantly looking out for tactics, not in the way that they're merely vigilant and, if a tactical opportunity arises, they pounce on it, but that they are actively looking for a tactic all the time when no such thing even exists. For instance, let's consider what a game might be like if you are constantly looking for tactics. This might resonate with some viewers. If you are constantly looking for tactics, and you play maybe a 60 move game, let's just think about it that way. On move 2, you might begin looking for tactics, because on move 1, if you're playing white, no harm could befall you, and there's no reason that you should win immediately. Hello, Gaius on YouTube. Thanks for dropping in once again. So, so you start looking at move 2 for tactics. Every move, you're looking at the forcing moves. You're calculating some sequences. Every time you have captures, every time you have checks, every time you can create one move threats, you're combining all those things as much as you can. And somehow tactics are not happening. Now, you play a different move. You're like, okay, no tactics here. I can safely play a positional move. Positional move. I think the phrase positional move is really funny because chess is a positional game. Every single position, is played positionally because it's a position. But anyway, so then as you go through the game, what fraction of the moves are actually going to be tactical moments where your thought process of constantly hunting down the tactics is going to pay off, right? It's probably if you're playing at a somewhat high level, it's probably going to be one time that a tactic is going to actually happen, and it's going to be near the end of the game. Gaius has some interesting comments about how you should play what the position demands, and I think that's sort of in the right spirit of things, because what I'm getting at is that tactics only happen in positions of a certain character, so you need to sort of sense the moment by looking at the position holistically. It's there's another phrase, seeing the forest for the trees, right? You should not be so focused on every little leaf and branch of the forest, but recognize the forest for what it is, some kind of larger scale thing that has an overall pattern that's important for understanding its small parts. So what are those criteria for tactics? I think that many people are under the impression that checks, captures, and threats are what tactics are made of. And to some extent, that's true. But if you just, hash out the checks, captures, and threats over and over and over again, move after move, it's not going to help. So let's go one step back from that. Why do checks, captures, and threats even exist? Why are they useful? In positions where we can combine these things into a tactic, I've noticed that there are a few characteristics that are common. MK, I think, is being ironic. He said, I solved it. Queen g5 wins a pawn. I hope not. I hope you didn't solve it, because Queen g5 winning a pawn would only bring you back to material equality and lose the initiative. So You could also force a draw. You could play queen g5, king h8, queen f6, king g8, queen g5 again, and get a draw by repetition. Anyway, so let's think about those factors first. If you've solved it, feel free to drop in the chat. That's always the intention of showing these things. But I really like this one for training because I think the only way, if you are a relatively fresh player, like 1500 or so in your rating projection, the ratings don't matter. They don't really mean very much. But if you're somewhere in that ballpark, this puzzle is best solved by first focusing on these details, in my opinion, as a coach. So the factors that we need to consider are, first of all, the king safety, because king safety is super important. I've discussed king safety together in a trifecta of other factors, including material and piece activity, in another video. So if you guys are interested in that in a general sense, you can go there. Just search for it on my channel. But king safety in a tactical sense, if you see that the king is open, what that means is that there are going to be several opportunities, either on the first move or on a later move, to attack the king directly. And it's important to take note of those resources. So I'm going to draw arrows to represent some resources here, okay? Queen g5 is one such resource, as MK pointed out, although the intention is not to win the pawn on f5. Right now, we don't know what this is good for. We're just tallying up our resources that are a result of the factors in the position that make this tactical. Okay, so the king safety is one factor. But just because the king is weak doesn't mean you should begin calculating variations. For instance, once I see queen g5, I might hold off a little bit more. Of course, if your intuition guides you to the right answer immediately, you should just play what it says. But I think you should have a sense of danger here. If you see queen g5 check, king h8, queen takes f5, and your variation stops, you should assess the position. And I also have a video about how you evaluate positions, so you guys can look at that too. Just in a lay sense, after queen takes f5, if we stop the variation, we can see that material is equal. Black's king is still a little unsafe. But after a move like c4, or maybe like even a more ambitious move that enhances the safety of Black's king by avoiding the perpetual check with queen f6, I am pretty confident that we can say it's at least unclear. Even if we don't want to say Black's better, unclear is probably a fair assessment. You might have to force a draw right away if you get a chance. Now, the safety of the king is just one aspect of this position. Another aspect is hanging pieces. And I've discussed hanging pieces a little bit in other videos. And the way that I define hanging pieces is very general. And I think it's general to a degree that is helpful. If you consider a hanging piece something that is attacked equal or more times than it is defended, then it's important to take note of that. And it makes that piece's vulnerability a resource for generating a tactic. So in this position, since this is a little bit of a weird thing for people to think about, I think it's good to do it as an exercise. So if anyone's watching this as a recording, you could pause here and try to identify all the hanging pieces, not just for white, but also for black. Mostly emphasizing on black, but we should consider what pieces of ours are hanging too. In fact, we should also consider our own king safety, but here our king is very safe, so I kind of skipped that part. So yeah, if you guys are here live, you can also try to figure it out. What pieces can be regarded as hanging pieces? One of Gaius's follow-up comments was that you should always improve your board position unless you are mating, and I think that is not exactly the case, because if you are focused too much on checkmate, you're going to miss opportunities to win material, and those can be necessary steps to getting a position where you can think about mate. So here, I would regard this knight as hanging. Okay, it's attacked once, defended once. I would consider this rook hanging, although this is a little bit a little harder to understand because it's attacked once, defended twice. But I consider it to be kind of like attacked and defended equal number of times if we remember that queen g5 is a resource. So this means that rook takes d8 becomes an option. Queen takes b6 becomes an option. Notice that while I am tallying up these moves, I'm not saying that any of them should be the first move. These are resources that we can combine in some order over some number of moves to make a tactic. And another thing that factors into that, if you say that it's attacked equal or less times, attacked equal or more times, then we should also include the pieces that are attacked and defended 0 times, like this one. Also, rook takes d8. By that same logic, we could consider that rook f8 is maybe hanging. And let's not forget these pawns, I suppose. This is attacked by the bishop once. It's defended 3 times, actually. But bishop takes f7, I think this move should be considered because this also, not only does it tie in with the hanging pieces, but this is strongly related to the safety of black's king. So while bishop takes f7 looks kind of crazy, given that it's defended 3 times, this move is a very serious candidate. It has to do with combining these other factors. But you can see, even though this position is relatively simple, it can be kind of muddy to try to understand what is going on here in terms of what are the tactical targets. Because, rook d8 is not an obvious tactical target. Rook f8 is not an obvious tactical target. Neither is bishop f7. The only really obvious ones are these guys. Yeah, I would say maybe just those are the obvious ones. So you also don't really need to be tied down to the selection of moves by the process that leads you to the conclusion that tactics are probably happening. I think if you have 2 out of 3 factors, if the 3 factors are an open king, hanging pieces where they're attacked more equal times, and then completely loose pieces, ones that are not defended at all. These factors combined, if you have 2 out of 3, and it's in multiple places on the board, I think it's very, very likely that tactics exist, and therefore you should begin calculation that way. This also wraps in with my candidate moves idea that I have a whole video about. Master John, welcome on Twitch. Thanks for dropping in. Gaius is bringing up how you should utilize all pieces for tactics. Sometimes it's not strictly necessary, but it often turns out to be the case that your pieces will all play some kind of harmonious role together. And to that point, another sign that maybe a tactic has to happen, or some other kind of forcing attacking option, is when your pieces are all as good as they could possibly be, then you cannot really improve them anymore, right? I think this is something called Steinitz rule. The Steinitz rule is that if your pieces are all perfectly placed for an attack, waiting will lead to the loss of your ability to attack, and your pieces will become worse. So when you consider all these factors together, you get more of a sense that tactics are happening. So now we've gone through that with this example, let's try to find the answer. MK is suggesting queen g5, queen f6 to attack the rook and the pawn, and then continue. So if you play queen g5 check, king h8, queen f6 check, king g8, and you want to continue somehow, okay, so he was suggesting redeploying the queen to f6 in order to target the pawn on f7. Okay. Well, one thing that comes to my mind is that after queen f6, black is a free hand. So even if this move is fine, this is a little bit of a computational burden. You have to consider rook takes d1. You have to consider c4. A combination of the two makes a lot of sense. Maybe even knight c4. All these moves look like things that you'd have to consider. So if you want to go down that path, you have to think about that. If I'm calculating and I see that suddenly black has all these options and I don't have any kind of really invigorating responses. Yeah, queen f6 is with tempo. If I don't have any really invigorating responses, then I might search a little bit harder for options before I go into the deep calculation. Yeah, queen f6 is with tempo. That's why I said queen g5 check, king h8, queen f6 check, king g8, and then we were talking about like what's going on here. Because I don't see any especially forcing move after queen f6 that really helps your cause. And that's why I was thinking about all these things that black is going to do on the next move. It might nevertheless be fine to play queen f6, but it looks more complicated than before because I'm not so sure how to begin really. Now anyway, there are other options here. So maybe what we could do first is just a candidate move search. Like without even calculating variations, what do you guys think is going to happen? It's not too hard. It is hard though. Let's start with candidate moves though. Alright. So Freddie said queen g5, king h8, queen f6, king g8, bishop takes f7. But I think after bishop takes f7, I have queen takes f7, right? Since your queen is hanging, you can't really go for rook takes d8, I don't think. After bishop takes f7, queen takes f7. If you play queen takes f7 check, I'll play king takes f7 so I don't hang the rook on d8. And if you play rook takes d8, I'll play queen takes f6. But that was a good attempt. You're kind of going in the right direction. There's some combination of the rook hanging on d8. There's this pressure on f7, the weakness of the king. If we can combine these all in the right way, and it has to be fast. That's actually another big hint that, you know, maybe tactics are supposed to happen right now. If you think that waiting one more move is going to lead to the loss of all opportunity, this is also a good time for you to calculate something. Although honestly, you should probably have anticipated it ahead of time if you get into that kind of situation. So here, what would black play if it was their move? What do you guys think? Some move that's at least equal for black. This is also a good time to pause the video if you guys are watching the replay. Yeah, block the bishop. I think c4 is a good way to block the bishop, because then you could get knight d5 on the next move. Well, not necessarily the next move, but knight d5 becomes an option if you use the pawn instead of the knight. So pawn c4 is kind of the idea. Yeah, we want to get rid of that bishop. That's so strong. And probably if you play c4, they'll redeploy it to c2. But then after like e4, probably... You could even just give the f-pawn. You could play like f6 and just let them take it, because then you're guarding everything. Like f6, bishop takes f5, materials equal now, queen g7. So I think they want to play c4. And with that in mind, it's actually a very big hint about what we want to play for white, how we should start the combination. Yeah, the bishop needs to participate immediately before c4 happens. So what candidate moves do we have here? So far I've heard only queen g5. It's like we just love to check the king and that's it. At least, you know, queen g5 check. What other variations should we maybe start considering? For sake of argument, what if we play rook takes d8? You know, just to get you guys thinking. Rook d8 is a move, right? Guy says sack the bishop or move it to a safe place. But if you move it to a safe place where it can't be blocked, it's kind of like you're just doing the work that black wants without them having to play c4. They're playing c4, so you'll move the bishop somewhere else. Thank you for the follow from Wayfaring Stranger on Twitch. Queen or rook takes. We need to consider both lines if you're going that way. So it sounds like bishop f7 is a candidate move too. Queen g5 didn't seem to go anywhere, so we'll leave queen g5 for now and focus on these two. And Gaius seems to like bishop f7. So let's first just discuss bishop f7. They can only take with the queen and the rook. Wayfaring Stranger, welcome. With bishop takes f7. So we have some support for this, it looks like. Freddy's back on the queen g5 burger. He says queen g5, king h8, queen f6, king g8, and rook takes d8. After rook takes d8, I would not play rook takes d8, I would play queen takes d8. So your idea almost works. I think Freddy's also getting close to the idea, although they're sticking with queen g5. Alright. I think Gaius is losing track of the evaluation aspect of this. You need to constantly evaluate the consequences of your actions when you're calculating for a tactic. After bishop f7, queen f7, if you play queen takes b6, you just won a pawn back in a fancy way. I remember reading a Silman book, which I don't recommend, by the way, where Silman called this like idiot tactics, which I think is very not, it's sort of mean-spirited. And what he meant was like people do a lot of calculation, they do many fancy things just to end up in a position that's like equal or worse than what they had before. So I'm not saying I condone his choice of words there, but you know, it's a funny thing to consider that there's a phenomenon where people like just play moves that leave them equal or worse off, and it like feels maybe kind of good and productive because they calculated a lot to do it, and so it happens pretty often in real games that's the case. So if we're playing bishop f7, queen takes b6 is sort of an added benefit. It could be useful, but shouldn't be the first move probably. Yeah, I know Gaius at this point. That was his calling card just now. All meant in good taste. So after bishop f7, let's consider one move. You know, if we're just doing the brute force approach, and they play, let's say rook f7, because I think for most people it's intuitive to take with a rook, not hanging the knight. Freddy's reiterating his variation, but I just... Let me see. Queen g5, king h8, queen f6. You said king h8. I think you mean king g8. And rook takes d8. That might be very similar to the actual game. While you guys work on this bishop f7, rook f7 thing, let me see if that's true. I think one reason that this position is not included very often in tactics books is it might have two solutions. But I don't know, it's been a while since I've actually looked at this. Yeah, queen d8, bishop f7, you're right, that makes sense. Because after rook f7, there's queen takes d8. I think that's actually an alternate solution for this puzzle, so that's good. Yeah, if rook takes d8, bishop takes f7, it's exactly like this puzzle. So that's a really nice variation, Freddy. So let's actually go to the bishop f7 move order, just because some people may have already been going on that one since I was pushing it pretty hard. Yeah, Wayfaring Stranger's on the right track too. That if bishop f7, rook f7, queen g5, the rook on d8 is going to go. we're going to already win back like considerable material with an attack, and then that actually becomes just like Freddy's variation that he gave. So Vikas, welcome. I think drawing would be selling yourself very short in this position. If you play queen g5, king h8, queen f6, king g8, queen g5, you're missing half a point. You could get a full point easily. In fact, there are two ways. Freddy found one way. We were just focusing on the bishop f7 way. So let's consider, so after bishop f7, rook f7, queen g5, the rook on d8 is going, and it's a win for white. So let's consider queen f7 then. It's not queen b6 at this time. We should probably play something kind of different. But it's the same pattern. So what do you guys think after bishop f7, queen f7? What's the move? I'm sure you guys will get this fast because it's already been mentioned in a couple lines. Freddy didn't give the entire line after rook takes d8, bishop f7 in his position. I think it's kind of necessary to see that here. Vikas, if the knight on b6 falls, the material is only equal, right? We have to keep evaluating the position here. We were starting out a pawn down, and what we're doing is winning the f pawn, which is kind of weak as it is, so I don't think it really is beneficial to win that pawn. It's not pawn plus. It's only pawn plus relative to the position we had before, which was pawn down. So try to keep track of the material on the board. Morning, Elskavone. At least it's morning for some people. Okay, so if bishop f7, queen f7, we should throw rook d8. And then this becomes very similar to Freddy's idea from earlier. After rook d8, rook takes d8, then queen g5 check, we're winning all the pieces. And this is more or less our solution, although we have two solutions. Queen g5, this was Freddy's idea. And in this position, this would become just like the position that I'm about to show you in the other line. And this wins the queen. So there's two winning lines. Bishop f7 is the one I like a little bit more because it demonstrates some of the nice things about this this way of looking at tactics. So there are also a couple other small lines, but I think you guys probably have already ruled them out since you found the hard lines first. For instance, this is a line, but you know, does it count? It's easy mate. There's this line, and I'm sure you guys have already seen. If you guys are watching at home on the recording, you can pause here if you don't see it immediately. It's queen h7 skewering, winning the queen on c7. This one runs into rook. Sorry, I didn't mean that one. I meant queen g5 and then rook d8. Like this. Totally winning. This one runs into rook d8. And then there's sort of a funny like pinball moment here where you zigzag all over the board and take all the pieces. And then you're just a piece up. So this is a really interesting position right here, because yeah, I hope you guys are okay with the variations I showed. I showed if they take with the rook and with the queen. So, and the king, and if they don't take. I think that's all the options. So it's very interesting because if you look at it in a forest for the trees, big picture kind of way, 30,000 foot view, right? There should be something here, right? But it's very easy to give up because the most enticing move that's easy to consider is queen g5. And alright, so let's say you're married to the idea of queen g5. You'll eventually come to a position where you play queen f6 and king g8, but you have to solve the same problem again of finding bishop takes f7 that hinges on the attack of these pieces. the rook on d8, the pawn on f7, the knight and the queen. Basically everything that is tactical about this position shows up in at least one of the small variations. And they're all pretty short lines, and they're all forcing lines. So if you're good at going through the forcing variations, the hardest part of this is actually acknowledging what resources you have and that they are enough to justify looking really deeply at this position. So this is a really good exercise for that, and I've used this many times in my coaching, and I'm probably going to retire this example just because I've seen it way too many times and I'm sick of it. But you know, it's a really nice one. So now it's in a video for everyone. MK says I can never see tactics, but I know that's not true. I've seen you see tactics. By transitive property, that means that you see tactics. Okay, so I've brought a couple other examples here that are from a book called Invisible Chess Moves. I think it's by Afik and who's the other guy who was in this book? And Naiman. So these guys wrote a book a few years ago. It's very, very good, but it's also a difficult book. And the nice thing about this book is that it focuses on psychological weaknesses. It's sort of like the other side of the coin from Forcing Chess Moves. Forcing Chess Moves is a book by Hurtan where he goes into how you should try to emulate the computer's way of seeing the board, and that this is good, looking at forcing moves all the time and crunching variations like a machine. And this other book, Invisible Chess Moves, it talks about what the natural human limitations are in just seeing moves. And they show many examples which are kind of, I don't want to say easy, but they don't have a lot of moving parts. They're more or less simple. But for psychological reasons mostly, the moves are hard to find. So here's one such position from that book, and I'll show just a couple before we wrap up today. They break the chapter down into motifs as well. Because we just went over the solution of the puzzle. Maybe you missed it. The solution was either bishop f7 or one other sideline with queen g5 and queen f6, and then bishop f7. The key thing... Hey, don't criticize me. I didn't skip. I showed everything. I'll show it again, though, for you. Alright, so... bishop f7. This is the main line, right? Now here they can only take these moves. In the game, they played queen f7. Yeah, so let's look at that one. And there's rook d8. They played knight a4 in a desperate attempt to not lose the game, but after b3 they resigned. If they take, then there's queen g5 and this one. We're winning the knight as well. If rook takes, then there's queen g5, winning the rook on d8 as well. And the other lines are more or less trivial, like this one's the queen, this one's the game. Okay, so that's the full solution. All right, so let's go to the next one. So they also sort their puzzles. Yes, there are two solutions. They also sort their puzzles by motif. And in one of the early chapters, they talk about moves that have objective invisibility. And what they mean by objective invisibility is that the moves are actually just difficult to see because it hinges on a lot of understanding of what's going on in the position and maybe calculating long variations and things like that. But I didn't want to pick those because I think for many people who are just getting into calculation of long variations is a common problem that will sort of just evaporate over time. And I wanted to pick something that was doable based on the length, but also interesting for all levels of players. Vikas says he's doing the Woodpecker Method. That's a very good book, although I do not believe in the Woodpecker Method at all in terms of their proposed pecking, like doing the same puzzles over and over again. I think if you've done them well the first time, it's just a waste of time to keep doing them. But yeah, good examples in that book as well. But one thing about Woodpecker Method is they don't sort the puzzles by motif. And I think learning by motif is really important. I'm going to make a video about that at some point in the near future. So there's an early part in this book that's about quiet moves. And that's where we are finding ourselves right now. The quiet moves are moves that are difficult to find because they're not brutal. They're not like a capture or a check, something like that. And I think these pose a special difficulty for calculation, because even if you feel strongly that like a tactic is there based on some factors that you've noted, like in the last example, you don't have obvious candidate moves for what to search for. Like in the last position, it's actually somewhat obvious that we should consider bishop f7 because it's capture and it's check. So if we're just following that really naive model of how to play chess, you can solve that problem. But for the quiet moves, it's much, much more difficult in my opinion. Freddie says that in this position it causes attention to take everything on d5. And that's a really good point. So you could just take a pawn on d5, and we'll get into that. But before we do, I think we should assess the position. Well, actually, before we assess the position, I think it's important to acknowledge this first intuition. So if bishop d5 is working, we should just play it. So let's actually go into that first. So let's say you play bishop d5, e takes, and I'm guessing you guys want rook d5. Let me see what you guys are suggesting. Yeah, guys, making a good observation about the rooks and their activity. So Vikas is saying, what about e4? MK seems to want e4, though I'm not sure what the second move is there. But I think, alright, so it looks like maybe people want rook d5. I don't know. So if you want rook d5, here black has an excellent move. See if you guys can spot it. This is not really like a black to play and win situation. They're under a lot of danger, so you need to find something here that alleviates the pressure. Some defensive resource. Yeah, MK has it. It's queen b6. This is a double attack, so we can't just move the queen because we're going to lose the rook on a7. We can't take on d7 because we'll lose the queen on b2. But if you make the forcing play, all the pressure comes off, and then it's just 4 versus 4 pawns. And maybe white's slightly better, but it's not anything to write home about. Wayfaring Stranger, we are just getting to the position. Right now, we were just addressing how people wanted to capture on d5 and why this is not an obvious puzzle, right? In this position, queen b6 takes all the sting out. So here we still need to search for a good move. But first, let's understand the position a little bit, because that's what this lesson's about, right? We should consider why there should be a tactic here at all. Like, why is there any reason to think that we're winning something? First of all, as you guys have already noted, the bishop on d5 is a hanging piece. But I don't think that's a sufficient condition for this to be a tactic. Like, just because something's under attack one time doesn't mean we should like go crazy and start calculating, like, ooh, g7's under attack, maybe I should go for checkmate. No, it's not really like that. You need to have a combination of factors, because to win in chess, you often need to create multiple threats at once, and in order to do that, it's good to have multiple targets. So let's try to identify multiple targets. Another one sort of came up in the variation with rook takes d5. Freddy's on the move guessing. Try to understand the position first. Okay, e4 is a move, but let's try to understand what's going on first. If it makes you feel any better, e4 is what was played in the game and it didn't work. After e4, they'll play bishop c6. Guys, stop guessing moves. Let's just see, like, why should there be a tactic here? Gaius is going the right way. White has a lot of space. If you quantify space as something that can be controlled by the pieces and not the pawns, yeah, maybe so. There's a lot of room for the white pieces to maneuver, and the black pieces are sort of cramped in. That's a good sign, in general. What about king safety? Is that fine or no? And what about other tactical targets, like other pieces that could be attacked? I think Gaius made a really good point earlier that we should not ignore. That the rooks have an intersection on d7. So the knight is also a tactical target. MK has an interesting idea. He's saying rook d7, queen d7, and then e4. I think evaluating that position is a little bit tricky. Because you will have to capture on d5. You get two pieces, but I'm a little bit unsure, because after bishop d5, e d5, I'm saying like black will play a move, you know? And then after bishop d5, e d5, they have a really strong pass pawn. It might be compensation, like, complete. Queen b5 is an interesting idea, but isn't queen b5 just like the other variation, where they play a counterattack on the queen and the rook? So let's say you play queen b5 and then queen b6. I guess you wanted to play queen takes d7. Is that true? This actually gets at my point earlier. I was asking about the king safety, and no one really seemed to have a strong opinion about that. But let's look at this variation with queen b5, because it illustrates some king safety issues for white. So if you play queen b5 here, with the idea of probably of provoking like knight f6 or some other pedestrian move, and then playing e4 with a pin, they will play queen b6. In fact, I'll play it out. Okay, so this is a hard puzzle, so I think it's a good idea. Somebody give a follow. Follow from King Marcher. Hola. And gracias. So here, queen d7 was probably what we were getting at here. But after bishop takes g2, there's a very not obvious situation here that you cannot take back on g2. Maybe I shouldn't think of this as king safety exactly. because the king will be on g2 when you finally take on d1, but just the general safety of your pieces is lacking here. Like after king g2, there's rook c d8, and then rook takes d1, and this is the thing that probably was missing. Okay, so it looks like Gaius was maybe not getting into the calculation too much. He was just suggesting a move. This is a logical move, but queen b6 is a very, very strong rejoinder. You can't ignore it. And once the queens are off, all the tension is gone. So we're actually kind of getting to the essence of the position now. That white has some piece coordination issues, but their position is very promising overall. e4 doesn't work. e4 was played in the game, and after bishop c6, like you don't have the bishop's support anymore. It's not working. And just to further emphasize, in the game, rook d6 was played, and here black also has a good counterattacking move that takes all the steam out of the position. So let's see if you guys can find it. If you're watching the recording later, you can just pause here. Black has to make a counterattacking move. Can't be passive here. Objectively, all of white's pieces are active. So if you play something lackluster, you're going to probably get rolled. King Marcher. We just went over rook takes d7. It looks kind of interesting. Maybe we should give it a little more attention. So rook takes, queen takes, e4. Here, the reason I hadn't gone into this in detail is I was a little unsure what move to play, but I think I just spotted it. In fact, you guys can pause here. Like, what should black do to escape this problem with tempo? They're in a pin, but they can get out very easily. Yeah, queen b7. And because the bishop on g2 is cut off, this works out very well. So rook d7 is actually a blunder. What I was thinking is compensation. I was thinking something like here, okay, I hadn't decided on black's move yet, and I was wondering, like, if you take on d5, are you even better here? It's actually kind of a good question. I don't know, let's pretend that black plays something really silly like this. I guess you could take on d5, and then it's not compensation. Yeah, so this would be bad. I guess you need queen b7, but it was there when we needed it. So almost, but no dice. Guy said queen f6 after. Okay, I'm a little disoriented. Maybe, well, here if queen f6, then there's queen takes f6. Oh, but maybe we were not on e4 anymore. I think we were looking at sorry, I got derailed a little bit here. I've been staying up very late, and so my alertness is a little bit lacking. Sorry, if it comes back to you what the whole variation is from this position, feel free to let me know, but I don't remember where queen f6 was possible. But I'll just emphasize again that we want to do something that attacks these pieces, but the direct approaches are not working. So if we think about this logically too, so it makes sense for us to keep pushing here. We shouldn't just settle and play a silly move like e4. We have such a promising position that we need to find more options, more candidate moves. For quiet moves in particular, it's often the case that you just need to find more candidates. The problem in every line is that there's a counterattack on our queen and our rook on a7, right? Well, in this position, it's white to play. So I think queen f6 is not happening. We have to play a move first. But yeah, queen f6 is also an idea, now that you mention it. Like, if black could move, they would probably play either queen b6 or queen f6. something like that, or bishop to g2 if they had a way of getting out with tempo, but they don't. Okay, so let me try to guide things a little more. We're looking for a move now, which keeps all the tension in the position, but prevents queen b6 and prevents rook a8. I think once you see it this way, it becomes kind of obvious. Wayfaring Stranger, our topic for the whole stream has been how you know when tactics are there at all, plus we're solving a couple somewhat difficult problems. I have a lot of examples about quiet moves that are from the book Invisible Chess Moves. I don't think I will have time to get into them in great detail today, but I will probably do another stream where I finish off all quiet moves. But right now we're just talking about, how do we know there's a tactic in this position? Because it's hard. If you have a hard position where the tactic doesn't just jump out at you, how do you know that you should persevere and keep looking? The Master John suggests rook takes d5. I think after pawn takes d5, black is probably happy with what they have. I'm not sure how you're going to continue the attack. For instance, after bishop d5, queen b6 probably, and only black is attacking, I think. King Marcher has it. It's queen a1. Once you see it, I think you know. Not just because I told you, but because the problems with our other lines were trading rooks, trading queens, trading queens. These moves are not possible anymore. So if you check all the same obvious ideas that we had a moment ago, you'll see that they're all working now. And even though it's black's move, they don't have a good response. If they move the knight, we play e4, right? All of these guys are in one line, all tactical targets. Yeah, it is keeping the pressure. If you play rook a8, Gaius guessed it too. There's bishop takes d5. And you win that pawn after all. Like, for example, rook a8 takes, they trade like this, and you might think that you're like not doing so great anymore, but after rook d5, they cannot rescue the knight. Like, the queen b6 idea doesn't work anymore. There's rook d7 or queen d7. Yeah, so this is the answer for this one. And it's a pretty hard puzzle in general. Maybe we could see like one more, and then maybe I'll wrap up here for today. But do you guys have questions before I move on from this one? Yeah, it's quite hard. But solving these hard puzzles, I think, is a great way of improving. Solving easy puzzles quickly will do literally nothing for your chess skill, in my opinion, based on my experience. I once tried doing 100 puzzles a day, or more than 100 puzzles a day, using platforms like chess.com and some other tactics training platforms, not just like random puzzles entirely at that point. But they were like fast puzzles and random data sets. And I think after about like a year of doing more than 100 puzzles a day, I didn't have like a measurable improvement. And I don't think it's just because I'm bad at chess. I might be bad at chess, but I don't blame that for this situation. I think that the tactics were just not helping. I think whenever I focused on motifs and I took a lot of time, it helped me a lot more. Okay. Difference between IM and GM is a good question from Vikas. And who gives GM title? GM title is given by FIDE, which is an organization, international organization comprised of chess players. And I have a lot of facetious answers for like what's the difference between IM and GM. But I think it's mostly like once you become IM, you probably have the resources in your life to become GM. And it's just a matter of like hard work and dedication and a couple hundred rating points and a lot of money. Oops. Let me find the position. Okay, so here's another example on the same theme. I probably have time for like 2 more actually after this one. So, similar situation. I don't think I need to explain to you guys that like white has a very promising position. Yeah, Gaius makes a good observation. It's about removing counterplay. And Master John, I also use Lichess. I'm showing on Lichess right now, in fact. And they recently added the themes, and I like it. I just haven't had any time to use it. I barely have any time to study chess. Whatever chess I do, it comes out of my sleep schedule because I'm working. But what I've seen from like the little time that I could spend on the Lichess themes and motifs, I've kind of appreciated. I don't think it's very valuable to rate puzzles, though. But that's probably a contentious perspective. But yeah, again, we're on the quiet moves for this puzzle. This is also from that book, Invisible Chess Moves, which is really fantastic, and I recommend it to everyone. Planet Chess Club says Rook G8 looks interesting. Yeah, if you could make them move their king or something, you would be utterly in the driver's seat, winning the end, good game, shaking all kinds of hands. So the real question, I guess, would be what happens after rook takes. Because I'm from the US, and my rating is somewhere around like 2100, and I am just getting back into chess, honestly. I didn't play from the beginning of the COVID lockdown. Yeah, E8 queen is definitely happening. Let's see. The problem with E8 queen is probably like a desperado and escape. Like, I'm thinking something like this. Now, you might have other moves in here. For example, queen g4 looks kind of interesting. Like, rook takes g4 and then E8 queen. But it does look kind of unclear because of rook g2 counterplay. Like, here, I feel like you're running away. Rook g2 is kind of still happening. Black still got a piece for some pawns. I'm not so sure about this one. This is an interesting idea, though. Definitely it's tempting to consider. I just don't think it's quite working out. But yeah, thanks for dropping in and suggesting that move. Even if it's spitballing it, I appreciate that. Because we're still at the part for this lesson where we're like, okay, why is a tactic here? This one is a little more obvious. But then also, like, what are the candidate moves? I think a lot of the people in the chat today, they have a hard time with candidate moves because they're usually suggesting, like, one line, and then there's a problem with their line, but then they kind of resuggest the same kind of thing. Not that that's everyone, but, since there are a few people who have candidate move troubles, I think it's good to just, spitball a few things, too. Gaius is an interesting question. What if we move our king? That would certainly be very, very quiet. I wonder, though, because in the line that just came up from Planet Chess Club, who also has a great stream, you guys should check it out. He's on Twitch. I understand that some people are across platforms, so they might not be able to see everyone's messages. But, if you search on Twitch for Planet Chess Club, you can get him. Oh, and he's on YouTube, it looks like. Yeah, cool. Oh yeah, I remember. I actually am supporting your YouTube page. I just haven't checked in recently. Yeah, so if we move our king, I don't see necessarily what this is accomplishing. For instance, if they play rook takes h6, I guess you want rook g8, king d7, e8 queen. Okay, maybe I see now, because after king c7, there's queen takes c8. So that is very, very quiet. Interesting. How do we defend against, like, some random king move? I have an idea. If you play some random king move, like let's say king h1, maybe we could throw this. Threat is bishop g2. And rook takes h6 is kind of there still. If queen takes h3, then rook h3 is check, and that's an important detail. If you had played king g1, I could probably give a check and make the same situation occur again. So here we'd probably have to try to go for Planet Chess Club's idea again. But I think this is a worse version. Well, you could get your piece back with check. That's probably not so bad. It looks very unclear. Bishop h3 is maybe not clearly bad. Queen g5. Okay. Another idea. I think the issue is that after king h1, you don't have like a threat. So in the other position, when you played queen a1, the issue for them is that you're still threatening e4, but all the defending options are gone. But here, it's like, what are we threatening? We're threatening to take the queen, right? But if we play like king h1, we're still not threatening actually to take the queen immediately. So it didn't improve our position. A lot of the time, these queen moves are somehow an improvement. Hide the queen behind the rook. That's kind of like Planet Chess Club's queen g5, I'm guessing. But I think this loses on the spy. If you guys want to... Yeah, rook h3. Good. So Wayfaring Stranger was faster than my suggestion that we should find rook h3. And after king g1, I think that queen b6 is it. But you only really need to see rook h3, probably. I mean, I don't see counterplay anyway in this situation. I guess you do have to see queen b6 check, but it's a little bit obvious that it's there. Because their king's just so wildly unsafe. But yeah, it's an interesting idea. Rook h3's on the menu. So that was queen g5. Notice this extremely bright spot of light behind me. That's not happened since I moved here. Okay, so we still need to find some other options here. A lot of the time the quiet moves is about finding the options, not giving up. Like, you know the tactics are going to happen here. You just don't falter. So here, we noticed one good line, that after rook g8, if we could promote to a queen without sacrificing, we would probably be in a really great situation. So let's focus on that concept here. That their king safety is worse than ours. Our pawn on e7 is very strong. And that a lot of our attack centers around not allowing any checks to our king and promoting. So how do we get a promotion going? What other candidate moves can we consider? It should be pretty forcing, because bishop h3 is more or less the real deal. Like if we play... Actually, king moves are a little bit logical. Like if you saw bishop h3 and this was like a bullet game, you might be like, no, I don't want it to be check. So you like just move your king to h1. But the idea with bishop h3 is that after king h3, rook h6 is check. So kind of logical. Gaia said queen h6. Queen's already on h6, so I think it was probably just a typo and you are on the right track. Wayfaring Stranger makes a good point on Twitch that it looks like we're almost in more danger than they are. Being a piece down, yeah, it feels kind of like that. But luckily, our pawn is like just as strong. Yeah, Gaius has it. It's queen h5. This is a really excellent quiet move. It's not even that quiet. Like you're looking at their king, you know. But this is not check. It's not capture. It's none of those things. It's a very small move. You know, we're not like swinging across the board and changing wings or something. It's just, you know, saying, do something with your king. I want to promote. You cannot take my queen, so you have to respect that this is going to happen. In fact, black just doesn't have a move. Once you see it, you know. That's how it is with these quiet moves generally. With, like, if they play bishop h3, there's rook g8, and that's mate, pretty much, in a couple moves. If they play rook h5, then there's rook g8, and we know how that goes. This is just the other variation we saw, but you're not down any material. You're just winning. Oh, I didn't mean to put it there. I meant to put it here. Sorry. Delete that line. Hold on. I should just take the rook, probably. Like, get rid of all that pressure. Taking the other thing with check didn't work out. My tired self thought that maybe we'll have a double attack in this position or something, but nope. Not happening. I mean, maybe... Anyway, it's a little bit too academic to consider. So they played rook g2 in the game, and, you know, ended up with this fantastic position. Yeah, they had to resign a couple moves. Okay, so I think I have two more positions that are also quiet moves, so we can move on to that one. So I think queen h5. Once you see it, you know. Okay, this one might even be a quick puzzle. This is white to play. And how do we know tactics are happening in this position, right? Let's consider the factors. If you want to pause here and think about it yourself, feel free. The main factor, I would say, is that the kings are exposed. It's white's move, so that probably favors white somewhat. That, you know, black's king is out in the open. Neither side can castle. And we have some hanging pieces, like there's a pin of the bishop and the rook. The knight on e5 is hanging. It cuts both ways a little bit, though, because black is probably ready to throw their own tactics in. Because, for example, They can't castle, so it would probably play like rook d8 or something, and you can see how that might go the wrong way. If you played, for example, some silly move like bishop a2, then rook d1 will be mate in just a couple moves. So it's a sort of fine balance here, and that's part of why these are challenging puzzles, but you know tactics are happening based on these factors. And we can probably select our moves on the basis of knowing these things. So Gaius says bishop takes f7. That's an interesting option. I think I would play knight takes f7 though, and it doesn't look as interesting anymore. I think if king takes f7, you're winning just a pawn. It's good to consider these brutal things first. I think it's hard to find quiet moves without first understanding why the direct approaches don't work. And that's part of what makes them, quiet and difficult to find. You have to notice and understand the very forcing stuff first. So what else? Bishop c6 also doesn't work for the same reason. The knight will escape danger. So we're already honing in on the right idea that we should probably play a move which creates attacks but does not allow black to liquidate the minor pieces. They should remain in danger. So what kind of moves are we looking for that are like that? And if you're watching this as a recording, feel free to pause here. This is a good time to think about it. Wayfaring Stranger has it on Twitch. It's bishop e4. And that's all she wrote. Because if they take it, there's rook e5, double attack. If they don't take it, there's rook e5. Yeah, it's just like it. After f6... What's the answer for this one? Just pop quiz. Easy tactic. Another good place to pause. If you've been finding the other ones difficult, this one is somewhere in the middle. Gaius, the move bishop to... You're going to say bishop to a2, I guess, right? The problem with bishop a2 is that they can play f6. It's very important that we choose e4. Wayfaring Stranger says f4. I think f4 lets everything slip. Because after f4, I can play bishop e4 now. There's no double attack, because if you play rook e5, I still have a pawn covering. It doesn't matter that you played f4. So maybe a lucky guess from Wayfaring Stranger. I think you mean rook e5. That's correct. Yeah, Wayfaring Stranger got it. Let's check, so they have to take back, and then this is a double attack. So all the factors that make this look like a tactical position are at play. In the first place, you can see hanging piece, hanging piece, hanging piece. That's three great reasons to start looking at forcing moves. And bishop e4 is a kind of forcing move, right? It's a discover attack. It's only hard to consider because you move it from a hanging square to another hanging square. And it's not like a capture or a check. But the recipe for an attack is entirely there. Yeah, we're kicking this knight out by force, but not on move one. Okay, let's look at one more move, and then I should probably move on and do other things. Okay, this one's white to play, and pretty difficult. It's even tempting to like wrap up before we do this puzzle, just because it's pretty tough. Maybe I could do something to make it a little bit lighter. Let me think about what hint I have. It's white to play though. This has a similar double-edged character to 2 puzzles ago, the Maratse versus Rami 1930 game. I forgot to mention the players in that one. Just to reiterate, that was this position where we played Queen H5. This one's Spoman versus Krasenko in 2009. So it doesn't look that quiet, but that's not the point. The point is that it looks tactical, and we should know why, right? Here, it's mutual attacks on the king, and there's also hanging material all over the place. Even though the rook on f1 is defended twice, I still consider it basically a hanging piece. Rook on a3, definitely hanging, even though you can't legally take it. If there's any reason that things open up, you could play b takes. Otherwise, you could maybe find a way to double attack the king and the rook, and then you can take that one without getting checkmated on b2. But most importantly, checkmate on b2, right? Rook takes f6 is definitely tempting. If you play rook takes f6, king f6, you have to calculate the consequences. I like to see some lines for rook f6. This is not the kind of position where you can just say rook f6 and then, like, you know, figure out the rest as you go. Because if you're wrong, you probably will get mated on b2. First of all, could you possibly be worse after rook f6? I think this is always a good place to start in positions like this. If you could not possibly be worse, then, you know, you can kind of relax a little bit and look at other options during a real game, because you always have rook f6 in hand if it's a draw. Alright, Gaius seems to be changing directions. Not confident about rook f6 anymore. If you push pawns, I'd like to know, like, how you're pushing that pawn. We have options here. We have 7 ways to push pawns, and a lot of them are pretty bad. I'm not sure I'm following Gaius's variation. I like to see, like, a series of moves more than a description of those moves. If you just, like, write the moves in a standard form, then I can immediately see it. It's a lot easier for me that way. So I always recommend that. But if you play a move like b3, you know, if I had to guess what you're getting at here, yeah, wayfaring strangers calculating, that's good. It's fine if it takes some time, although this is our last position for the day. So if you play like b3, the problem with that is that you lose the game. So rook takes b3. For instance, b3, rook takes b3 check, pawn takes b3, queen takes b3 check. If you play queen b2, there's queen takes b2 mate. If you play king a2, then there's king a1. Then there's queen a4 check, and after queen a3, queen takes a3. It's mate with queen and rook against the edge of the board. So b3 is not possible. b4 is obviously not possible. g5 might be the move that you guys were looking at here. But black has another threat. Part of the challenge here is probably in the prophylactic thinking, realizing what your opponent's up to. I think if you play a move like g5, they'll probably play queen a6, and I'll just show it on the board real quick. I think queen a6. Just threatening rook a1. It's mate. Like it's gotta happen. So, you know, you might see this move, but the checks are running out very fast. You know, I don't see any more meaningful checks. You probably have to play a move like c4 or c3 already to avoid losing the game, but then you're losing the queen with rook a1. Like, that's not good. So they have several things. For Gaius on YouTube, an example of how you might write your notation could be like this. I'll just do it in the chat. All right. I left the comment via restream. So that's an example of like a 3-move variation. The reason you have to be specific is that you have like, so first of all, it's like very long to read, but also there are many queen checks, so it's good to say, you know, exactly where you mean. But if you play rook f6 immediately, it's just a draw, and this is the main point here. If you play rook f6, king f6, queen h6 check, king f7, you probably have to just force a draw immediately. Like you go here, and here, and if you want to be ambitious, you could play queen e8, but I think it should still be a draw. Like queen e8, this is what I was thinking for the draw, because this is super easy. Like the king's never going to cross this line. You just, you know, go there and back. But yeah, if you want to try to chase a little bit, you can do this. But this is still just like an equal position. Now it's black's turn to start giving checks. So rook f6 isn't working right away, but it's a nice idea. You know, the sentiment is right. So we need a move that improves on the idea of rook takes f6. And this is what's hard to find. So I'm going to spoil it. If you guys are watching the recording, you should just, you know, pause here and try your best. But the move, which is very hard to find, is rook e5. Outstanding move. Because if you play, for instance, queen a6, which was a troublesome move in the line where we play something very very calm. You know, like if we played g5, I think queen a6 was a problem. But now, after the same move, we have this one, and this one, and this one, and now they're like totally dead lost. Like, just for a sample, I could play discoveries with the rook too, but like, you can see this will be mate. So rook e5 is very, very strong because it's just preparing a new entry point for the queen, which is a way of enhancing the rook takes f6 idea. Queen b4 is an interesting move, but if you do some calculation here, you'll see that this is a better version after queen g5. Here, if you had already calculated the lines with queen h6 and then eventually queen e8, you would find that this is a better version just by directly comparing the two. But to actually see the consequences here, it's a pretty long line. queen h8 is a critical move, and you have to calculate rook g7 as well as king f7. But it's good for white. Like, let's just show a sample line. Maybe let's start with rook. Well, rook g7 takes all the pressure away, so it's probably more logical to look at king f7. There's queen e8. And it looks a lot like before, but it's not the same. Because we kind of made them play a subpar move. And that's how the mate happens. If they play rook g7, then there's rook f5. And eventually they're going to lose the rook with check. Like here, there's no move except, the queen g7 is going to happen next move. Okay, so rook e5 was the outstanding move in this position, and it's very, very hard to find. Wayfaring Stranger is asking for one more, and I would love to, but I want to go back to bed. And that was all that I had prepared for today. I didn't really have time to put together a ton, but I will do more in the future. So if you stay posted on my, Discord is actually the best, so I'll send the Discord to you with a link. If that link doesn't work, just hit me up in the comment section. I'll send you a fresh link. Or you could just, I usually post my streams that are scheduled a couple weeks ahead of time. Next week I will probably not be streaming because I'm going to play a tournament. It'll be my 5th tournament since 2019. So that's cool, getting back into it. Yeah, I'm glad that you appreciated the training. I thought these examples were nice and it's good to share with everyone. Yeah, so you can stay apprised of the situation by mostly following on Discord. Also check my YouTube schedule. I have some schedules on Twitch, but they're not very smart. They just say like when my session is. They don't get updated very well. Yeah, so you guys can look forward to that. I will have some tournament themed content in the near future. I want to do more stuff with tactics. And you should also keep posted for my simuls. I've been doing simuls on Fridays. My next one, I think, is in 2 weeks. The only way that won't work is if I go insane during midterms, right before it happens. Even then, it might still happen. Anyway, thanks for showing up, everybody. I think I'll sign off now. And good luck with your chess until next time. All right, take care, everyone.